This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with contributions from our awesome viewers. If you want to help make Bullet Heaven even better, check out the links below. In episode 147 of Bullet Heaven HD, we took a look at Strike Witch's Hakugin no Tsubasa, a twin-stick style horizontal shooting game for the Xbox 360. On the whole, Strike Witches was functional but not especially deep, instead opting for a visual novel style approach to the huge amount of storytelling and exposition. In 2012, Cyberfront and Kadokawa Games brought Strike Witch's Hakugin no Tsubasa to the PlayStation Portable with all of the DLC bits and extras that would normally have had to been purchased over Xbox Live, the same content that has since been delisted. The purpose of this review is for direct comparison to the Xbox 360 version. It is very much the same game except for a few key differences, so if you want to know more about the game's core mechanics, please watch episode 147 listed in the video info. So how does the PSP version compare? Let's take a look. You might not think it, but for a game that is by and large the same game on the Xbox 360, the gameplay feels quite a bit different and requires a bit of retraining to really play effectively. The lack of a dual analog setup means that Strike Witches on PSP is going to suffer control-wise. A lot. In fact, there isn't a single optimal control scheme of the many offered. Some people might be able to use the arcade-style setup where the witches will fire in the direction traveled with a locked direction fire input for more accuracy available, but we just stuck with the first dual setup since it offered the best independent fire movement setup with the PSP's face buttons acting like the right stick on the 360 controller. There are obviously going to be inherent problems no matter which one you choose though. In the case of enemy formations that encircle your trio of witches in particular, getting hit is almost guaranteed. This is especially frustrating since they will often be at angles that the face buttons just can't hit. Otherwise, with the arcade controls, you're moving into shots to aim at the angles you need to. It's rough. Otherwise, the game is exactly the same progression-wise, with all of the modes intact. Arcade mode opens up when a team completes the game, and more characters become available as more teams complete their arcs. Practice mode is also available to fine-tune players' technique. This version of Strike Witches will last players a little bit longer than the Xbox 360 version, with the newly introduced Nakajima. Her story takes place in an extra 5th arc, but as was the case with the Xbox 360 version, all of the story is completely in Japanese, so your mileage might vary. Nakajima is unlocked in the arcade mode when this arc is completed. One major addition to Strike Witch's Hakugin no Tsubasa on PSP is a time attack mode which has players use a custom team much like the unlockable arcade mode to take out all of the bosses in the game in as fast a time as possible. Players have unlimited life but will have 10 seconds added to their time for each time they're hit. However, if any medals are collected, each will remove 1 second of time from the overall counter. The Xbox 360 version wasn't perfect, but it was definitely playable. However, the PlayStation Portable version is one that we never really felt comfortable with, even though we did manage to just about 1cc the game with the new characters team. If this game were to be released on Vita instead, it would have been set up much better for the kind of gameplay that Hakugin no Tsubasa offers. As it stands, replay might be limited since online ranking and achievements do not exist for this version. Scoring in Strike Witch's Hakugin no Tsubasa on PSP is identical to the Xbox 360 version. Collecting medals will boost the score per pickup from 1,000 to 10,000 points at 100 medals and to 100,000 points when 200 medals are collected. The number of medals times the number of enemy kills times 10,000 and then reduced per times hit once again makes up the bonus score at the end of each stage. In Time Attack, there is no score, just a tally of how much time it took to take out each boss. The amount of times a player is hit is also shown. The presentation in Strike Witch's Hakugin no Tsubasa is where the PSP version suffers most of all. While the original voice actresses once again reprise their roles in fully voiced scenes throughout the whole game, almost every other aspect has been scaled down to make it work on the PSP. Visually, the PSP version is a mess. The textures are N64 level blurry, models are exceptionally low polygon with heavy jagged edges, there are polygon flickers and tears, and a lot of the background elements are jarring compared to the 360 version for obvious reasons. However, the trade-off is a solid 60 frames per second throughout the entire game. The visuals are still clear enough to make out who's who on screen as well, so at least the game won't chug along or confuse players. At the very least, the character portraits and story backgrounds are just as good as the 360 version, save for a lower resolution. Granted, on a small screen like the PSP's, this could be more than passable to some. The sound has also taken some serious damage as well. Some of the effects are different than the 360 version, with many others being severely downsampled, including voice samples for the witches in-game. The dialogue portions are still high enough quality that if you want to listen to the story, it's not bad at all. It's just that everything else doesn't measure up. Again, sacrifices are made to throw it all onto a UMD, but don't expect greatness on any level. Speaking of the story scenes, the base exploration is once again back with an extra area for the new character, Nakajima. For those who have a solid grasp on Japanese, these extra story scenes will enhance what the PSP version has to offer. It's a shame that the PSP version is so stunted in so many areas, but how does it stack up? Let's take a look. There's not a single control scheme that's especially comfortable in Hakugin no Tsubasa on PSP. Dual Mode 1 was what felt best. The challenge to this version of the game is exactly like the 360 version, but with points lost for most of the challenge now being because of the controls. Lengthwise, with an extra character loop and a whole new mode of play in time attack mode, there's more to play in the PSP version. No online ranking and achievements are obvious omissions. The hardest thing to swallow about Strike Witch's Hakugin no Tsubasa on PSP are the visuals. They may not be especially good, but they still manage to convey what they're supposed to be at 60 FPS. The sound was mostly forgettable on the 360 version, but the PSP version's downsampled effects and voice clips hurt. Story VO is still great though. And once again, weak scoring and simple gameplay keep the ingenuity of Hakugin no Tsubasa to a minimum. We technically got the PSP version of Hakugin no Tsubasa on PSP first of the two, but when we tried it, we felt we needed to get the original to see how much better or worse it could have been. As it stands, that was a wise choice. The PSP version is somewhat serviceable, but if you can swing the Xbox 360 version instead, go for that one. Strike Witch's Hakugin no Tsubasa PSP version gets a 2.75 out of 5. On the plus side, since the PSP is region-free, you can play this game on any system worldwide. At auction, you can get the PSP version of Hakugin no Tsubasa for as little as $30 US. A limited edition with a Lynette and Android is also available with prices ranging between $60 and $240.